So right now, just a little bit of background. I want to make sure I get his knife. Oh, Pie Face. That's his name, Pie Face. I don't know why I got that wrong, but right here we're talking. Pie Face is going to talk a little bit about how he used his money um, for school to gamble, and you know this is all based on the premises of you know when was this a problem, or how did you realize this was crazy. You invested all this money into gambling, and it's like you're coming out with nothing in the end, pretty much. So let's take a look at them.
To boil it down to the bare basics, is that what it is then? Is it the idea of winning more, or is it the enjoyment and the thrill of just playing, or do they come hand in hand?
I think it comes hand in hand. I think it's a bit of both, because I could have great enjoyment playing on 20p, but when I've had days, you can lose £500 back in the day where it was £100 a spin. Yeah. You can lose £500 in 3 minutes, and I've had it. I've done it, and I've been sat there thinking, like, on a break, thinking, what the fuck do I do? I'm like, I owe this, and this out, and I now have another 2-week period of 50 to 60-hour weeks where I have no money.
So that's pretty much the big premise of gambling, in just a watered down version. You go and again, the excitement of gambling, the trigger of being able to go in and spend a certain amount of money to potentially win it all back and more. And then he comes to a point where he spent all his money, and he has debt that needs to be paid. He has the money already to be able to pay for it, goes in, spends all that money gambling, comes out of it, and is in even more of a sticky situation because he's run out of everything that he's already accumulated over time, and yet spends it all in one day, or even like within an hour, right? So he's like, okay, well, this is crazy because like I've saved up all this money, and I have all this time, like I know what's important in life, to go to school and get a job and everything, but in the end I end up gambling it all away because I think I'm gonna hit the jackpot. This time I'm gonna hit the jackpot. Oh, okay, it doesn't work out. Okay, well, makes that money back even after being going through hell to get it back. Okay, you know what? This might be the moment. I'm going to go for the jackpot. So it's really just that cycle of just getting trapped into just this vicious cycle.
And then I have to beg, borrow off other people, and it's that horrible cycle. I've had nights where I've been living at home, and just a massive love to my family and friends who, without them, like, the support they gave me constantly, like the amount of times I fucked up or dropped to like stupid lows, and they were there to support me, was just incredible. But I've had nights where I was staying at home, I hadn't paid my keep or whatever for my parents, which money wise they obviously don't care about, but it's the principle. And I've shared that much that I've slept in town, like under a shop.
So his family and his friends support him. They don't know what's really going on until they realize it's a problem. So you're going to see, ladies and gentlemen, how parents, they don't really understand it as much as the victim himself or herself. So they're going to support it because they want to make sure that their kids are provided for. That's what parents do. They want the best for their kids, no matter what the scale, no matter what the odds are. They want to provide and make sure that if their kids ask for help, that parents are going to be able to be there and provide for them. So they don't really understand kind of like the overlining situation. They just know subjectively, this is what I have to do, support for my kids. And so here, Pieface is, scrapping off his friends and family just to make it by. And then he gets caught again in this vicious cycling where, you know, gambling takes over and hacks into his reward pathways.
Because I've shat it that much that I'm that much in the shit. Like, you just have to consider, like, your world. You're like, what the fuck do I do?
Yeah.
And having that every single week and fortnight of your life, but then you get that 1 week where, you know, you win $3,000 or something, and the world's fucking amazing. And that's the problem with it. The world's amazing. You pay everything off. You're like, right, that's it. I'll make a change. 2 weeks later, you've lost it all, what you had left, and you're borrowing again. And it's a horrible life. I mean, I know you say we're talking about the Big Brother stuff, but when I come out of Big Brother, I actually gamble for about a 2-week period.
Right. Because
not being able to gamble in there, to be fair, was very helpful.
Yeah. And
I was doing well, but I came back from, we did like a meet-up. I came back, and this is once again, the train got stuck in Totnes, which is a station close to Plymouth.
Yeah.
So he's talking about a story in which he, you know, is kind of like, he gets off. So the train is what he talks about, and again, he put it perfectly himself, in which it's just a vicious cycle in which, you know, you win everything, you hit the jackpot, and then you try again, you lose just as much money, if anything more. And so now he's going to talk about, like, a little story about him going in, and you know, getting triggered into gambling again, and so forth.
And I knew there was a bookies there, and I just thought, fuck it. I literally got off the train, and I think I lost about $3,000, which is obviously a disgusting amount of money. And another thing to mention with the gambling, it's not about the amount you lose. I mean, I think that's the most I've lost probably in one session. It's not about the amount you lose, it's what it means to you. Like, the amount of times when I was streaming, on a Friday, I knew, say, I wanted to put some money on the game, I'd borrow £100 off someone for that and lose it. You know, the effect of losing that, which I don't get me wrong, £100 is still a lot of money, but I know people go, oh, you only lost 100 quid. But when that's every penny you've got in the world to get you by for the next 2 weeks and you don't have it, it's pretty horrific.
So, as what he said, it's, you know, I couldn't have said it better myself. It's not about the amount, it's about what that amount means and what the purpose of that amount was. So he spent all this money that, you know, again, you mentioned before on, you know, he had money for school and he had money for things to push him, you know, further on in his career that people have given to him, you know, friends and family, and he spent it all away gambling. And it's almost like when he sees a bookie, when he sees somebody that's going to allow him to, you know, be able to gamble, it's like an automatic trigger for him in which he is like, you know what, I'm here for this duration of time. And guys, I want you to consider the fact, I want you to think about boredom. I want you to think about having a period of time where you're doing nothing and which you're stuck with yourself. And sometimes that could be horrific when you're stuck with yourself and you don't know what to do with yourself. So you do what you know how to do. You know, you do things in which to pass the time. And for those with the behavioral addictions, that's really tough. That's really fucking tough. Because if you have an addiction in something in which, you know, time passes so quickly, in which you're spending hours and on hours doing, you're probably most likely going to do it if you have that time to do it. And then again, when we get into video game addiction, we'll talk about, you know, putting whatever it is that you're doing, over all the priorities that you have going on in real life. So let's keep going.
Wow.
So that day I went to the bookies, and I remember distinctly I lost £1,000 on one horse. Biggest bet, I may have placed slightly more, but probably the biggest bet I've ever placed. It was 1-2 in like a 3-horse race, and it fell at the first hurdle. And I just remember, and then I brains all the rest on roulette. And I had to come home, and I got caught because someone I know lived there, and they told my dad that they'd seen me there. So my dad knew. So I had that, and I was every week at the football. Like I'd be gambling. Like I'd have periods where I'd taken 2 months off and been able to, and then just gone back to it. And every week going to the football. I mean, every single week at the football. Like the first thing I'd want to do when I got.
Okay, I'm gonna stop it right there. He said he could take a 2-month period off. Yo, what's going on, Gun Buns? We're just talking a little bit about behavioral addictions today. The nits and gritty of it. What's going on? What's going on, Stardust? Good to see y'all. Good to see you. I'm starting to get toasty up in here. So, what he said was, I was able to stop for a 2-month period, but I couldn't handle it. I had to go back. I was triggered, and I went back. Now, his biggest mistake was there was no purpose in stopping his gambling. He stopped gambling, but, was it because he was just kind of tired of it? Or was it the fact that he was actually trying to wean off of it? Right? Now, there's also this third option in which you stop gambling, but was it really to do something else that's going on in life, or or were you just bored? So it's this aspect of when you stop gambling or you stop doing something, what is the purpose of why you're stopping, right? And when you do stop, what are you doing to preoccupy that time that you're thinking about, whatever that addiction is? Are you instead, playing, working out? Are you doing more work, right? Are you investing more time in your job? Are you investing more of that time in your family? What is it? What is getting more of that time away from the addiction, right? And vice versa. When you are addicted, what time are you taking away from life priorities such as work and school and family? What time are you taking away to be able to gamble or to be able to game, right? So these two topics go hand in hand. And again, when we talk about these two topics of gaming and gambling, it's a matter of investment. What are you trying to achieve when you do this, as well as being able to be gratified and hit that jackpot, right? Be able to get that win in Warzone, or multiple wins in Warzone, or you're trying to make a deal, or whatever it is. So what are you trying to achieve in your habits, right? And so here he got caught by his parents, and now they have to figure out what to do with him.
There's bookies, and that's not just put football bets, so just to play.
Really?
Just to play the machine. Like literally, honestly, it got to a point where I wanted to get to the bookies more than I did the football. I'd be, we'd stop for breakfast, and I'd buy £100 worth of scratch cards in Sainsbury's. Like that's how bad it was.
Wow.
Every week I'm having to borrow money off someone for a ticket because I've done my ticket money. If there was a week where I bought my ticket up front, it was a good thing because I knew I could at least get in.
Yeah.
That feeling of effectively almost every week having to do that is horrific. But you do get that. What keeps you going is you get that 1 week where you win £1,000, and once again you think the world's rosy again, and you're like, look at me, I'm Billy Big Bollocks with my money, until you look like a twat. But the day was Sunderland away. I can remember it. It was 2 years ago, I think. Last week we played Sunderland away, and I promised my friend Jess. I said I'm not going to gamble. I was like today, because it was a special day. It was like the longest trip we were going. I was like, I will not gamble today, and I genuinely didn't intend on gambling.
You hear that? It was a special trip. He didn't want to gamble. He didn't want to. He didn't want to put gambling over his friends, right? And so that was his reason to try to not gamble. However,
we'd gone into town, and then my mate Ryan, had left something back on the bus. So I was like, I'll walk back with you. And that once still, I wasn't intending on it. We go back through. He's like, I just want to chuck a quick £5 on. And I'm like, oh, I'll just go in. And before you know it, it's, you know,
Triggered, and then
going badly. Like I know exactly how much I lost that day, and it was about £2,500 to £3,000 that I'd lost. I know the money again, but I'd actually I took a PayPal. So when I was streaming, I took one time a PayPal business loan. Like it was on like a good system, where I.
so now he's taking loans. More, you know, it's just pretty much a spiral downhill in which he doesn't want to at a certain point, but again, he gets triggered. There are cues in our brain in which when we see somebody, for example, he sees the bookies, he knows where the bookies are, he knows exactly where everything is. So when he's getting closer, when he's within that proximity, and he crosses that line in which, okay, we're going in that direction, that's the trigger. That environment around it is the trigger. He knows exactly where it is. He knows the door. He knows exactly where he wants to go and how much he wants to spend, right? So when he gets in that proximity and, you know, this excuse of, okay, well, I'm going to help my friend, he finds himself just getting caught within his own dopamine system because he, again, wants to be able to, you know, spend time with his friends and you know, make it a special trip, but then his own you know, reward pathway takes over and says, listen, you know, this is how you're going to have the most fun, this is how you're going to spend your time, because, you know, you want to make the best out of your moment. Okay, well, this is your way of saying, okay, this is me going to spend the most out of this time that I'm here. So he gets caught not only by people, but he gets caught within himself that, well, I'm in a sticky situation now, might as well give it all, and there goes £3,000.
They take a percentage of what you pay. So I took that to basically, because I wanted to give my stream a kickstart, so I put that in to fund my stream. But I paid it off, so I then literally took another like £2,000 from them and just blew it. Like, and
and here's another thing. He's also, as what he said, he's funding his stream. So in that perspective, he's putting money not only into other aspects of his life that he's invested in, but he's also doing another investment on his on streaming, which is also a gamble as well. Like when here, like we're not a big community, but you know, I'm still gambling on my time and my effort to show that, you know, we're a growing population, we have a mission, we have an identity, we want to do this, that, and the other. You know, he's doing the same thing for his community, so he's taken out away from parts of his life to invest in streaming. Now he's also taken parts out of his life into gambling. So he's taking a lot of what he's doing, you know, in other aspects of his life, so family, school, work. He's taking out from that to fund these two investments for his life and to grow.
I literally remember stood there queuing in a bank in Sunderland, like literally, like, because I've lost £1,000. I'm literally bouncing because there's someone in front of me at the teller, and I'm just thinking, come on, you know, I just want to literally get that money and fucking smash it in there. I've lost it all at this point.
What? So sorry. So you've lost £1,000 in the bookie.
I've lost £1,000 in the bookies.
And now you're trying to get another one to go back.
To Halifax. I have to go to the counter because I wanted to get the couple of grand out. So I have to literally go to the counter to get it. Like, this is, like, as I say, the worst. Normally, if I was on a losing session, like in Mackey's, you know, it's a few £100, but once again, it's what that money means to you, not the value. But this was, you know, this was bad. This was a bad day. I mean, I was going hard. I lost it all, and at that point, I just was like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, because at this point, my stream was going quite well. It had a good boost, you know, and I'm just thinking, Jack, you know, you're fucking ruining your life here. And my friends, I'd lied to them and told them I hadn't gambled. They found out I had. And my friend Jess, we were really, like, close mates. I've never seen her so angry. Like, you know, when you see someone that angry and you think, you know, fuck me, like I've done bad. And I just said to her, I said, look, and we were at the top, literally in the ground. I was like, that's it. Like, legitimately, I am done.
So there it is. That's his rock bottom. So when you have an addiction, you come to a point you realize it's a problem, right? You can realize it's a problem even as it's going, right? But then when you are reassured that it's a problem by somebody else, and you know that this is bigger than what you expected. And that's the problem. Is that it takes to the point where you realize it from others that it's a problem for it to be, okay, well, I have to create a solution. Sometimes people don't even create solutions. It just happens to them, and then all of a sudden they become numb to it because they know that from everybody they knew and loved, they're kind of piecing them more. They're separating themselves from the person that is addicted to whatever it is, and they're so used to losing people in that fashion that they just get stuck in this addictive personality, right? So it's this understanding that if I am going to be addicted to something, when am I going to stop? When is it going to come to an end? And how many people, reasons does it take to get to that point where you actually act on that solution? Right? Now, a lot of the problem with behavioral addictions, and, now it's growing in need within not only the United States, but throughout the world, is finding places to seek out help and to find, that solution. But, not everybody has access to it. Not everybody has money for it. It can be a very sticky situation when you have behavioral addictions because you come to a point where, well, it's too much of an effort. I'm just going to try to self-monitor and try to figure it out myself. That's the problem. Is when you know you have a problem and you're trying to figure it out yourself and then you can't figure it out and things get to a really deep place and you're helpless. And you come to a point where you feel that depression and anxiety just overtaking you, and then you start to leap over to suicidal ideation, right? Now, he hasn't gotten to that point because, again, he had parts of his life in which he is succeeding in. For example, he did make a good investment into streaming, and now he is... And potentially he might have had a deep connection with depression, but it was never to the point where he was really just out of solutions. No, he had ways in which he could find answers within, what is growing in my life, but he was also losing a ton of money to the point where, okay, well, I can't really fund the things that I'm growing, so I need to find help. Let's watch a little bit of this and then we'll move on to pornography.
I am walking away, like I've had enough. I can't put you guys through it anymore, and I can't, fuck with my life anymore. And I paid the whole thing back, and I still play poker as like more of a hobby, if that makes sense. Like I have limits, and I know when that's enough for me to go. And with the football cards and stuff, we like our football cards. I get involved in things like that, but in terms of casino gambling, sports betting, anything like that, 2 years, nothing.
That's really interesting. So he has created limitations for himself in which he knows where the line is, right? He set boundaries, very strict boundaries, right? We call them rigid boundaries, in which he knows that's the line. And if he crosses that line, then he's going to get put back into his old ways. But he knows that creating this line, he was able to have a healthy pattern of, okay, I could play poker as a hobby. I can do these things, for fun, but I'm not doing it as a greater investment. And that is a huge, that's like immensely huge within addiction, is when you start to create your own limitations and find what is healthy and what is abnormal. And for Pieface, you know, he's able to create that line. He knew, again, what is going right in his life. He knew that streaming was going right. He knew that, the friends and family that he has in his life to support him, in what he wants to do and who he wants to become, acknowledge this. He knows that that's the part of my life I want to support, and the problem part of my life, which is gambling addiction, needs to be restricted, constraint. It needs to be put on in a strict bubble, so that if anything were to go wrong in my life, okay, well, I know what that line is. If I were to go back to my old ways, okay, I need to have a safety plan in which I know what to do if things go wrong. And that's something you kind of go over in counseling. I don't know if he received any counseling in his life, but what you go over in counseling is when you hit a certain point, you have a safety plan in which you know what to do, you know where to go, who to talk to, and if things were to go down. Within AA or NA, you have sponsors in which if you're tempted to go back to your old ways, you have that person who is also enduring this, who has also endured the same stuff, is there for you at any time. So these are kind of like the accumulation of how even behaviors can create an addictive habit, right? If you are stuck in a way in which you're spending this amount of money and you're putting yourself in a worse position than you started out with, then you're obviously falling into a hole. And it what really is to understand about this whole part of addiction is, when you're in that hole, are you going to try to climb out, or are you going to try to dig that hole deeper without you even realizing? Sometimes you don't even know that you're digging yourself even deeper in the hole. But it happens because it's a subconscious part of your mind that, okay, well, this is what makes me happy. Well, it's a little bit artificial to say that, right? Because even when you think you're making yourself happy doing these things, and you're seeking that pleasure, that dopamine release, the endorphins, you're seeking that. When you get it, is it artificial, in which it's just for a brief period of time, or are you finding this this overall understanding of satisfaction, which when you do achieve it, are you still growing with it, right? We're type human beings. We always want to grow. We always want more, right? And that is that's the same type of like understanding when it comes to addiction, is that yes, you won your money back, but you want to be able to excel. You want to be able to achieve even more than what you even came in with, right? Same thing comes with streaming. Like you have people that sub to your channel. You have people that follow your channel, donate to the channel. You have people that do these things within streaming. But how are you going to grow from it? How are you going to push yourself further? What is the next step, right? For addiction, it's a little bit hazy to see where that endpoint is, because you're doing the same thing over and over again. Is there a purpose to it? And again, he found that there wasn't a purpose to it. That the gambling was just kind of an artificial happiness to, his life. And that again, lucky for Pieface, he had people that supported him. He had people that could say, listen, like, this is not working for you. Multiple people. Not just one person, multiple people. So he was kind of on the lucky end there, having that supportive system. But it comes down to, do you realize what's going on? And when you do realize, are you committed to continuing with it and trying to change your habits? Or are you going to continue with it and kind of dig yourself deeper than where you are, right? And sometimes people think that the solution is to get better at something. Well, that's not necessarily the case. When you're addicted to something, you don't think that it's negatively affecting you until you hit that lowest point. And then you realize, okay, well, I have to come up with a solution to this. It's not always the case there. And that's the problem. It's catching it before it amounts to that, rather than letting yourself seep lower and lower in water until to the point where you can't breathe and you can't swim up. Right? He was able to swim up to the surface, but not everybody does, and we have to consider that. Right? So that's kind of like gambling in a nutshell, and that kind of is a good leeway into behavioral addictions, in which, you know, you find yourself doing something excessively to the point where, you know, you can't get yourself out of it. Kind of like with substance abuse. However, substance abuse has more biological factors. There are still behavioral triggers that have to do with getting back into whatever you're doing, alcoholism, or any type of substance abuse. You know, it's the same parts of your brain that are active when it comes to gambling addiction and substance abuse. It's the same thing. So, you know, when you're considering your habits, consider the fact that, well, what are your habits going to amount to? What is the purpose of it? What is going wrong with it? And when do you get triggered? When does it come to the point where, okay, when I see a slot machine, or I see a bookie, or I'm around the general vicinity of it, or I see like a card on the table, or like it could be the smallest thing. But when does it get to the point where you're diverting your attention away from a card and towards the idea of gambling? That's where it comes into play. That's where addiction comes into play. All right. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that when we get into when we talk about gaming addiction. Now we're going to take it to a separate part of addiction that is also being researched a lot nowadays. This part of addiction is a little different because let me get on over. We're going to talk about pornography. And now actually we're going to talk about pornography in the way that we know. So pornography, we as human beings, it's not the fundamental basic need of what we need. Like, for example, it's not like food or water, like being able to ingest and gain energy, or to sleep and gain energy that way. It's not that. It's the next level up, in which we need intimacy as human beings. Some people can restrain themselves better than others, but we all kind of grow up in the same way, right? In which pornography, but intimacy becomes more of a psychological factor when we're growing up. I usually, when you see kids getting into it, more and more, that's around age 12, age 13, where you're going through puberty and your hormones are just acting up, and you know, you just need to get out and get that release, right? Now, when does it come to a point where it becomes a problem? And that has to do with this modern understanding of what pornography does towards social norms and towards seeking pleasure, seeking that release, right? But also being closer and closer to that intimate factor, and being able to work with it, right? So here, what's his name again? Arthur Moore. There's a lot of people that actually talk about addiction, like Terry Crews, who have had issues with pornography addiction in his past. I thought it would be a better idea to talk about somebody, you know, not as famous, right? But somebody who is, also went through it, even in this modern day society in which you find pornography online and accessible, but somebody just to really explain it, really kind of like talk about when it becomes a problem and so forth. He Before this, I kind of fast forwarded, but before this, he talks about he found a video from his dad. He popped the video in. He was like, "What is going on?" And then the more and more he grew up, the more you kind of realize this is like, okay, this is more kind of like a biological need that I feel that I want to have. Like, I want to be able to get that release, and so forth. Like, this is amazing, right? When you grow up and you learn about your body and you learn about things that make you feel good, and don't feel good, you start to prioritize yourself, right? Pornography addiction, you're really tapping into your reward pathway, right? You want that release of dopamine and endorphins. But there's also something that you get. We call this the love drug. It's called oxytocin. Also another neurotransmitter that's released in your brain. And when you get that release, you're also feeling that intimacy factor, right? Now, we're going to watch two videos. We'll talk about Arthur's story, but we're also going to watch another video. It's a TED Talk, and it's the other side of it. This is more of the male perspective, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the female perspective of it. It's funny, the female perspective coming from a male in this TED Talk, but it's actually a really interesting perspective about it. Right, and we'll talk about it a little bit more, but let's listen to Arthur, see what he has to say. He's going to talk a little bit about his first date and going forward.
Porn is for your sex life and for your life in general. I think this was the first time that the seed has planted that maybe I'm doing something that is a bit off. Maybe it's not really right. Maybe it's not very good for me. But the moment that I really realized that I'm doing something wrong, the big slap that I got was when I was actually with a beautiful woman and I just couldn't get it hard. That was because just a few hours before that I watched porn and I did my thing for like 3-4 times.
3-4 times. Okay, so first things first. He had a date. Like, he was with somebody who's a beautiful woman, and he said that I couldn't get hard. Okay, now he mentioned 3 or 4 times, so that means that he's really just in. This is a commonality for him. This is a common habit of his in which he invests his time and effort again into feeling that intimacy factor, right? Now, the one thing that I thought was interesting is that he couldn't get hard, that he was with this person. Yes, he didn't have that energy, but there is also something else there. And this is a more individualistic type of idea in which when we're all different in this way. When we see that person that is attractive to you, what are those factors that make that person attractive? And nowadays we're seeing the the whole again the whole rainbow when it comes to intimacy factor. We find certain characteristics about that person that make us attracted to them. Um, we see how, looks are one thing. However, certain things that that person does or say also can be considered attractive, right? So let's listen a little bit more. So potentially that could have been a factor towards him not feeling the same way. He was considering looks for attraction, and again, he did 3 or 4 times. So that, I mean, there's all your energy, but there's also something else there.
With porn before that, so I had no sexual energy left for her. And I just saw it. I just saw the direct consequences of me watching porn and me not being turned on now with this woman. Generally, I started to notice how porn started to affect my life on an emotional level, where I'm a little bit more depressed after watching porn. I'm a little bit off energy. I'm not very inspired. I'm not very creative. I am generally less me.
And there you go. He's we last week we talked about that hedonic line, in which you have a certain line in which when you hit that line, you see there's that release of dopamine and you've hit your goal of feeling good, right? But what happens when that bar gets lower? I'm sorry, when it gets higher and higher and higher, in which to the point you can't hit it, and you just feel like you're not yourself, you're not feeling like yourself, you're not at that stage in which you used to be before. And so, it feels like there's the time that you've been doing is like a waste, right? And you're just not yourself. Well, this is Arthur just brings up his example of not being able to meet that hedonic line because he does it so consistently that it's so hard to reach that same feeling of pleasure, right?
Like, okay, I realized around 22, 23 that it's bad. Now I'm 34, and that the shadow of porn is still chasing me. Like, I had periods where I kind of decided, okay, I'm done. Maybe it would last for like a week or 2 and 3. But then I would like get really frustrated. I would maybe approach a girl on the street and she would reject me, and I would be like, women suck, whatever.
That's huge. He mentions rejection as a point in which it's just, he's trying something else again, 2-3 weeks. Again, he's like, okay, I'm going to stop. And he has purpose, or he has some sort of purpose, some level of purpose. But then when he goes and he approaches this girl and he is rejected, he starts to lose hope in that domain. He has all this energy to start it out, but then when you realize you're trying something new and things are going wrong, you emotionally start to feel agitated, and you start to feel this anxiety that things aren't going right, and that puts you into this depressive state in which you might not want to do it anymore. You might not want to try anymore. You don't want to lose. You don't want to get nothing out of something that is right. And again, it's an ongoing cycle. Even after you stop, if anything, you're gonna go through more hardships than you did when you were going through it. But it's finding that eventually it comes to a point where like you try and try, you'll find your level at a certain point, but when you don't find that level, you potentially could go back to your old ways.
And I would come back home and I would watch porn. I would feel heavy or bored just to watch porn. Something is off about my life, I would just go to porn because it's like an immediate guaranteed satisfaction. For that, like, let's say whatever, a few minutes that I'm watching and I'm doing my thing, I would feel this excitement. I would feel this like rush. It's almost like drugs. I would feel that like high in my body, but then right after I just drop down into a like kind of almost depressed state of like feeling bad for doing it, feeling depleted of energy, feeling like I'm just out of alignment. I'm out of my true connection with myself. I think.
So there he goes. He says that he's out of connection with himself after he's released. Again, it's so funny to hear that, because when, in a serious topic, he's seeking that release and that level of pleasure, and then when it's all over, he feels depressed. He feels like it's the complete opposite of what he's trying for, but he continues to do it, right? And over time, it just gets worse and worse. Now, I say that's funny because when you go into it, you're hoping that this is what's going to get me to that level of pleasure that I'm really seeking. And this can go for anything, like gambling, or for gaming, or for, well, shopping's a little bit different because you're doing it because you feel a certain way, so you just kind of you're trying to kind of like distract yourself. But for pornography, you're doing it because you want to as what he said, it's you're seeking that high. You're trying to get that level of dopamine release, so that you feel good again. But then when it's all over, you go right back down, and then you're back into that state in which you feel like you're wondering, why am I doing this in the first place? Same thing with gambling. Why am I doing this in the first place when you're losing? So you're quite literally losing it, and then that creates, again, emotional distress.
I think I can confidently say that every time I watch porn, the core reason underneath it is belonging, connection, and intimacy. So if I would not meet that, the escape would be porn. Sometimes you can do all the right things, have the beautiful date, go to bed with a woman, and still not have that intimacy, still not have that connection. I would not feel that connection that I would subconsciously, I have to say, crave. I would go to porn.
So there you go. He doesn't feel those three things. And when he's with that person, is he not getting it? Is he not feeling the same way? When it comes to pornography, you feel like you want to be a certain thing. Like you seek a certain aspect of intimacy when it comes to pornography. Right? When you grow up and you've starting to get into what, like, this understanding of what intimacy is and what sex is, and when you're not getting those certain characteristics that is attractive to you, in the end you're not feeling it. It's not going right. You start to feel ways that make you feel crappy about yourself, that make you feel absolutely terrible, because you're missing something in your life. And when you miss that certain aspect of your life, you don't feel like yourself, right? You feel a certain way, but then when you're not, as social beings, when you're not with people that have similar characteristics and things like that emotional connection, then you don't feel like you. Now, we all know who you would like. If you're trying to figure yourself out and you're still trying to understand what you like and what you don't like, what makes you feel a certain way, this, that, and the other. When you're trying to figure that out, you go through a lot of trial and error. Well, for pornography, for him, as what he mentioned before, it's instant gratification. That's what I get. Like, this is what I want. This is what I'm going to get. Now, when you don't have that, when you're separated by technology, when you don't have that face value between two people, then there's a complete disconnection right there, right? And then when you add in the fact that, you know, your body is not enduring a certain, there's certain operations in which your body goes through to feel a certain way. When your body doesn't go through it, you're physically not getting it, right? So for Arthur, you know, he wasn't getting those certain characteristics, and he thought he could get that instant gratification. But again, as social beings, in that physical matter of getting that intimacy, those characteristics, whether emotional or physical, when he doesn't get those, he doesn't feel like he's getting everything that he needs, and then he's going back into this cycle, right? So when we talk about pornography and that intimacy factor, and even when we talk about we're going to talk about the whole other side of addiction when we talk about females, but we're also talking about social norms, and we're talking about, you know, how this creates, you know, pornography creates kind of these social behaviors when it doesn't connect, when things go wrong. Why is this happening? Well, it's because an excessive amount of time is to use pornography for modeling, right? And that's the problem, right? When you're growing up and you're trying to learn about sex and you're trying to learn about intimacy, there's this huge disconnection between the person you want to be and the person you're becoming. And that's where we're at when it comes to how pornography affects you know, identity in certain aspect, and how it could even create an addiction out of it because you don't know any other way, right? So let's look at the other video, and we're gonna look at how this is a TED Talk. Rand Gavrelli, he's talking about, you know, he's had a lot of experiences doing lectures and stuff on pornography, and well, just talking about how porn affects social norms. And so he's talking about how it affects you growing up, and why that is the case, and why he stopped watching porn because of it.
And porn is in our households whether we want it or not, and I believe that it does not agree with our well-being. And because we have internet in the Western world all over the place, almost in every cellular phone now, we've got 90% of 12-year-olds watching porn on a regular basis. And it has both an addictive effect and a paralyzing effect. It's addictive because we develop somewhat of a dependency in porn, but the paralyzing part is because, mainly for young boys and men, because porn is teaching us that as a man, you are solely valued in sex by having a large penis and an eternal erection.
And there it is. So he pretty much is saying, like, porn is going to be there. It's going to be all around us. It's a huge fucking industry. I think it's obviously a multi-billion-dollar industry. And that, you know, the reason for that is that every person we can all relate to, because we've all endured, you know, this we've all gone through puberty at a certain point in our life. Well, obviously from the ages of like 10 or 11 or even 9, and all the way up to like 17, 18, right? So we all kind of gone through this period of time in which we're kind of trying to understand what this feeling is, of feeling pleasure and feeling intimacy and overall how this reflects us and how this reflects identity and well-being. But he's also talking about, again, the social norms. We're growing up, and there's this byproduct in which you're also learning things about society and learning things about how to get it, in which, as a kid we're learning, okay, well, in which in certain ways, in order to pleasure somebody, in order to make them feel good, I have to be a certain way. And that's okay, that's I can agree to a certain extent in more of a healthy capacity of hygiene and so forth, right? But when it comes to things you can't control, like your dick size, right? Like that's something that it shouldn't even be a consideration of how you can affect somebody in a positive nature through intimacy, right?
According to porn, being a valuable sexual partner does not relate with being sensual, passionate, attentive, generous, well coordinated. None of the above. It is all about large penis and eternal sunshine, which we don't possess. So boys become paralyzed, and if they don't become paralyzed by watching porn, very often they turn into imitators of what they saw, which means they become aggressors. Aggressors, even when emotion is involved, like there is so much sexual abuse going on nowadays within the confines of what we perceive from the outside as beautiful teenage love stories or healthy adult relationships, because we don't really talk about sex. We just see it all over the place. We don't really talk about it. So what goes on in the confines of a certain room, but these are all sexual mutations.
So he says we don't usually talk about it. That's true to a certain extent, and not true to a certain extent. We are taught what sex is. We know, we kind of like see it from more of an objective perspective in school, but then but he's right at the certain perspective that, well, we don't really talk about the other social factors of intimacy or sex. We don't talk about how pornography affects the minds. We don't talk about how it affects, this industry affects us growing up and turning into the person we do. And he talks about this paralyzing factor, in which when we don't become the thing that we see, then we turn into the things that then we find other ways in which we turn into the things that we see, such as aggression. So he's talking about like, like more of like that hardcore stuff, in which, when you're growing up and you're trying to understand what identity is in the perspective of you, when you're trying to seek the one things that you, when you try to seek out your needs and wants, and then what it comes down to is, you have to change to become, to be able to achieve that. Well, here we have the perspective of which, okay, well, now we have somebody who's becoming more abusive, somebody who's who has more violent behaviors, and is who has transformed themselves into one thing they might have not have wanted to become, but they have, in order to seek out that pleasure, that level of pleasure and so forth. So he's just saying that, like, okay, well, that's the paralyzing factor. When you don't get it, you turn into something. You became the one thing you swore to destroy, and that factor is really, it changes you to the point where you have destructive qualities, and those qualities cannot carry over, and you become the villain here, when you were just really trying to understand how things work. And it's really just, it's sad to hear, because kids want to understand these things, but they don't, because they're stuck. Again, the conversation's not really talked about what is reflective of pornography and what isn't. Well, a majority of what you watch in pornography is not real, and you're just finding that instant gratification of what Arthur's talking about, and it completely eliminates the intimacy factor of emotional connection and so forth. So yeah, it's again, as what he says, a sexual mutation.
That happens. If we talk about women, it's not only that, but young girls and women get the message not only from hardcore porn, but from our porn-influenced mainstream culture. Have you seen any Miley Cyrus, Lady Gaga video clip, commercials? That's porn with clothes on it. So girls get this notion that if you want to be worthy of love, first and foremost, you have to be worthy of sexual desire.
And that's huge. Now we see a culture in which, or pop culture in which, you have to sexualize yourself to be noticed. And for women, that's so tough, right? Because you're completely eliminating all those other amazing qualities of women and who they are and what they want to become and just how amazing they are in parts of society. You're taking that away because we think that justifying yourself as a woman means sexualizing yourself as a woman. That's not true. But because pornography, when we grow up and we learn about sex and we learn about intimacy and we see pornography and porn stars and everything related to becoming this, sexual diva, that's what we think we have to become in order to be noticed. Not even just women, but men as well. And that's terrible because that completely eliminates our humanistic qualities of what makes us so amazing, right? And so we ignore those qualities and we hyper evaluate our sexual appearance about more centered on attraction towards physical appearances rather than emotional and psychological qualities, and that's terrible.
And now, the definition of sexual desire almost equals be like a porn star. So I work in dozens and dozens of high schools and junior highs. In every single one of these schools, I find girls that at a certain point agreed to be documented in an intimate situation because they wanted to please some guy that they had feelings for. And this guy misappropriated their trust. Always same story, so he sells it on WhatsApp application or on the web, in the internet. And normally nobody even addresses him in terms of moral. But it is always girls that suffer from shaming and mortification. They can change school, they drop out normally. Change school, move to another city and still be haunted on social networks. They develop clinical depressions, severe eating disorders, as if we don't have enough reasons in our culture to develop eating disorders. They become so isolated socially. So some of them, like Amanda Todd, rest in peace, some of them actually commit suicide.
And that's it. The internet nowadays captures everything. So, that's why, even evolutionary standpoint, women are very protective of themselves about what they give themselves off to because they don't want to be hurt, right? They don't want to put themselves out there in that perspective to be humiliated, to be just absolutely separated from what considers a normal girl because this awful part of their life has happened. And again, in the internet is very good at haunting you, even in the smallest degree of, you see a picture of yourself or a video of yourself from years ago and it just is terrible to watch. Well, imagine that. Imagine the most humiliating part of your life happening, being on the internet and, thousands and potentially millions of people have seen this. It's terrible. And so, this all started from just trying to please this person that they like. And they feel like they have to sexualize themselves to do it. That's awful. That completely takes away from the humanistic traits that made them wonderful in the first place. And again, severe depression, eating disorders, anxiety disorders, right? Aside from mood disorders, you see substance abuse. You see a dual diagnosis because of this one part of their life that just haunts them forever. And so they feel trapped in this world. They feel like they can't undo what they've done because the internet has passed it has had this up for years, and anybody in the world can see it, and it won't go down. Once it's up, and you can't stop that. So the internet is an amazing place, a wonderful place. You can buy things online and have it the next day. You can talk to people across the world. And just like what we're doing here, like I'm meeting people from across the world. We're talking about something so important, which is talking about behavioral addictions to those, might have an idea, but not really in a descriptive fashion, such as what we're talking about. We're doing these amazing things, but at the same time, the internet can be such a destructive thing in which you build these habits and lose yourself in these habits, and it becomes more destructive in nature. Or you post something and people just absolutely cyberbully you because you think it's going to have a positive effect, but it doesn't, and it just snowballs to the point where it becomes your greatest mistake. And that is how a lot of these mental health issues are brought up, is from what we see online, right? So when social media, let's consider this factor. When social media came out, I'm sorry, not even just social media, when like certain apps came out, like Instagram, Facebook, and all those things, do you know how drastically the suicide rate came up as well? Yes, it was amazing to see that we could connect with, all this information and people and things and places. But at the same time, it also taught us to be a certain way and do certain things, because this is where we get all our information. So the internet, as great as it is, can be super destructive in a lot of capacity, and through pornography, there you go. And we're not even getting to the brain. Like, we haven't even talked about how this progresses,
because they find no more value in life or in themselves. So porn is not only in our house, it is a capital case. It is not a minor phenomenon in our society. It is a question of life and death sometimes. It is mainly a question of life and death for the people who participate in porn, because porn is not an embodiment of freedom of speech, freedom of occupation, blah, blah, blah. No, it's an embodiment of sex exploitation working side by side with human traffic, raping, pimping, solicitation. For every one porn star with a book contract or a production company, we've got hundreds of thousands of women and girls who does not survive out there. Literally, they just don't make it. The sex industry just, how do you say, chews them up and spits them back into brothels, into hooking in the street, escorting, massage parlors with happy or unhappy ending, depends who you ask. And I'm not joking, this is serious, like this is the whole spectrum of prostitution. So many of them doesn't even make it to the age of 50. I'm talking countries that the average life expectancy is 75, 76 years now. They don't make it to the age of 50, for reasons mainly. Drugs, STDs, sexually transmitted diseases, being murdered by a John, a pimp, a boyfriend, and the fourth reason is suicide once again.
And there it is. When you get caught in this industry, when you think, okay, well, this is what I'm becoming, right? For those who are, kind of like connected with pornography or with sex or whatever, and you want to take it a step further. Well, now it's being put at a level in which you are exposing yourself to so many risk factors, and not even just the risk factors of like, as what he says, STDs and obviously HIV and all that stuff. You're not only exposing yourself to those physical factors, but you're also meeting people you don't want to meet ever. You don't want to meet these people, and these people, they hook you back in because of, well, oh, you're good at this, man. We got to get you doing this, and this, so that you can get money, and then you can do this and that, and so you meet the worst people, and these people, they put you in a position where you're selling your body for goods, and that puts yourself in a position where you become numb. Not only do you become numb to the intimacy factor and the emotional connection to sex, but you're also putting yourself in an environment in which it's just never safe. You're gonna meet just the worst people, and those people can put you in harm's way. Again, aside from all the physical factors in which you gain from having sex with multiple people. So again, prostitution is illegal all around the U.S. Not everywhere, but it is illegal. However, we see this happening on pornography every day. New videos posting up. And there is no... You said prostitution needs to be legalized, though, but if it is legalized, then we are encouraging more people to put themselves in harm's way. If anything, as what he said, 50. Having all those physical health factors, putting yourself in that part, in that aspect, do you even consider the fact that this might be for some people, the easiest way to make money? However, they're putting themselves in a health risk. And again, once you're on the internet, you feel like this is becoming you. This is what I am. This is my identity. It's like the internet is identifying you as this person rather than allowing you to identify yourself as who you want to be. But you can tax it, give workers safe and proper routines, workplaces, ensure proper safety and security for both workers and the clientele. Now, let me tell you something. When you go on dating apps, you see sex workers. You're going to see sex workers. There's actually there's not a lot of attention to it, but this is like the safe kind of part in which sex workers go to dating apps because, a lot of people all around are trying to find that intimacy factor. They want to have that, especially nowadays considering the pandemic. So when you consider having more of a regulated system when it comes to prostitution, well, you're also encouraging it in a lot of aspects to, whether they want to or not, to be able to go out there and sell your body for things. And now, for some people, they want to do that. They have a passion for it. They found that this is what they want to do, and so they go for it. We talk about OnlyFans like as a joke, but this is like an actual business that they want and that they accumulate. Just like kind of like we talk about how, gaming or streaming is a hobby. Well, when does it cross over to becoming an occupation, an actual thing that you're doing to raise money for yourself and to grow? Well, there are multiple things. There's two sides of the coin, right? When you legalize something, that means that you're commending it and that you're saying that this should be allowed, right? When you're saying something is illegal, you're saying that this is encouraging harmful habits, that you're encouraging more of a threat to your own life than others. And that's more of the policy making aspect, or the legislative action towards, a certain topic. When it comes to pornography and everything, we're talking about social reasoning, social cues. We're talking about identity. We're talking about these things. Now, what do we do here? Now, we could legalize, and we could have more of an understanding. I'm sorry. We could legalize it. We can have more regulations, and we can allow people to do what they want to do within sexual attention, or we can add in education as a part of how pornography escalates to certain aspects of occupation. It's really a two-hand sword here. It's really a two-hand sword. Where do we go from there? How do we go and take pornography and utilize it to safely, accommodate pornography within our lives? Because pornography is, again, as he says, in every household. But how do we restrict ourselves from having it? How do we restrict ourselves from having all these issues come about because pornography told us we have to be a certain way? Valid points are probably very important in terms of developmental ages like teens, but in terms of places that have legalized it, they have seen drastic decrease in sexual assault and harassment cases. I think that is an important side effect. It's not definitely a gray area with lots of indicated consequences. It's not clear and definite. And that's true. We are talking about a gray area, right? And again, we're going to talk about gaming addiction after this, and that's also a gray area. When do we see it as an addiction in consideration of seeking pleasure, and when does it become an addiction in which you're a workaholic and you do this so much in order to grow and you don't want to stop it? You don't want to waste your time in other aspects of your life, or you're taken away from time in your life in order to focus on growing yourself as a person, whether it be a sex worker, whether it be a streamer or a gamer, right? Gambling is a little different because, it could be the same thing, because if you want to be in the world poker tournaments, it's the same concept. However, the purpose of kind of like this talk about, addiction is really to just talk about how, sure, it can be turned into a hobby and it can be turned into, something as a part of human nature with balance of other priorities in life. But it can also be very harmful, in which if you don't balance yourself and you don't have a purpose, an overall purpose to it, and this is more of a mindless kind of concept, then you're really not going to digest a lot out of it, and it's going to digest you more than you're going to digest more out of it. If any, so another way to put it, control. Is what you're doing controlling you, or are you controlling what you're doing? Those are the two differences there. And Dynasty, you also mentioned that you had there was a dramatic decrease in sexual assaults and harassment cases. Potentially, in some areas, right? In some parts of the world, there could be. Just like, for example, providing safe needles. Providing safe needles for those who are addicted to heroin. Right? It does provide more safety when it comes to it. But you're also encouraging the use as well. When we're talking about addiction, there's that biological need for it. And then when we talk about biological addiction, we're also talking about withdrawal. When you don't have something for a certain period of time, your body endures, um, the shakes, the sweats, you can't sleep. Eating is irrelevant. Like you can't do other basic needs because your body needs this in order to get its normal dose of, dopamine, endorphins, serotonin, all those things. Right? So here we're talking about a topic, again, all of these topics are gray areas. All of them. All of them deserve specialists in which they dedicate their lives to research and provide information and education for those who don't understand this, who don't understand the extremes of pornography, of gambling, of shopping, tanning even, of gaming. And it's important that we look at these gray areas and ask questions so that we can look into it, do studies, and find the answers. So that's kind of all I want to kind of say about pornography, is that there's this gray area in which, it can be destructive, and it can also provide kind of a sense of identity of what you want, of what you need, right? Gambling, same thing. Why are you gambling? Why are you going to the slots every week? Is it to make a shit ton of money, or is it to get that money for paying for this? Why do we put ourselves through risky situations, and why, and who or what is it for, right? That's what's important. And also, what is your biological needs here? What are you getting out of this? Is it the dopamine release? Is it the is it attention? Like, are we getting social factors that come into this? Why are we getting this, right? So now let's move on to gaming. This is, again, we'll probably talk about these subjects individually. If people ask me to, I can go more in depth about certain topics of, say, pornography and gambling and gaming. But we're just going to talk about the basic premises of behavioral addictions. These are the three most common behavioral addictions. Within pornography and sex addictions, the only thing that you can find in the DSM-5 are about fetishes and hyposexuality. Not hypersexuality, hyposexuality, which is not wanting to have sex at all. And then you have fetishes, which are, and then obviously you have pedophilia, and you have voyeurists and extremists in those capacities. So you have those, but fetishes more relating to specific things that get you going, right? But there's nothing about hypersexuality, and we see a lot of attention needed for that, in the respects of, okay, well, there's a lot of people that are coming and trying to find help for this need for sex all the time, and pornography addiction, this need to get this release but cannot connect with others. Well, how are we researching it? How are we providing help for it? And how are we going to take policy making to the next level? So that's that. So let's move on to gaming addiction. Gaming addiction, very close to gambling addiction. These are two documentaries. So the first one is talking about more of the extreme of gaming and how parents and teachers and so forth don't really kind of understand, how this is affecting and why this is happening, and even what's going on with the gamer himself or herself. However, the next video after this, and again, they're going to talk to somebody who is a part of DICE, who talks about is their PR person, right? So you get to kind of see the business aspect of it. But then we're also gonna see a video in which it documents, people and how they were able to take gaming to the next level to grow, from a passion, from a hobby to like a passion in working and doing what they love. So let's keep it going.
I'm talking from when he would wake up in the morning to when he went to bed, finally passed out at night.
So is this a whole video?
Katie Perez says she tried everything to curb Nico's gaming, from weekly limits to prohibition.
And that's the problem there. So parents don't really understand gaming. I'm just going to say, unless they've gamed themselves, they don't really understand gaming or gamers. They don't understand why people do find specific games to game, and why can this be maybe potentially a positive effect. So for parents who grown up, going outside all the time and not having technology or the internet, they think that when technology comes in and kids are spending a certain duration of time, like a certain duration of time, we're talking about 10 to 15 hours playing video games. By restricting that, it's kind of like, okay, you have a substance abuse. We're going to take that away from you for 2 weeks. Okay, like you have an addiction you have a heroin addiction. Okay, we're going to take that away from you for 2 weeks. Well, first of all, two separate things here. We're talking about biological addiction to psychological addiction. Now, the biological addiction part of it is, again, the release of dopamine and being able to tap into that reward pathway. But at the same time, we're talking about the psychological addiction. Why am I playing the games that I play? Why do I play Star Wars all day? Why do some people play Call of Duty all day, or Dota 2, or Overwatch? What is the purpose of it? Well, this is the concept that parents don't, these are the questions that parents don't ask. And so they think, okay, well, screen time equals addiction, so we're going to take that away. That should help, right?
But she says the more she restricted him, the more desperate he got.
I would go in and tell him, hey, it's time for dinner, or we're going to go to the mall today, or we're going to the movie theater. He would throw a fit. He didn't want to leave because he didn't want to leave the game. And so it significantly changed to me who he was as a person.
Changed him.
Yes.
Now, that's her perspective of him, right? Now, when we talk about kids and their own perspective of themselves, that's a whole nother side of this story, right? This changed her factor of what she thought about Nico, but, Nico, it's like we kind of cancel out what Nico's perspective of it. Now, there's points in which, people go and seek help, and we're going to talk about Restart, right? Which is a place where you can seek counseling and mental health services specific to gaming addiction. But there's also the aspect of, why do we game? And what does this say about yourself? And I feel like parents, again, this is the concept of identity that parents need to understand. Well, when you spend a certain duration or spend a majority of time doing a certain part, like dancing or playing sports, it's the same concept with video games, right? Even computer science, when we think about it, we still think about our grassroots. And for video games, these are kind of like our grassroots into technology, right? But, at a certain point, if you don't have a goal kind of oriented towards gaming or towards whatever you're doing that you're spending a lot of time, well, then you start to become stuck. You don't have an answer to this open question, which gamers aren't really that good at, because gamers are more good at closed closed questions, which is like like understanding the smaller objectives and so forth, which is very good in some capacity if it's transformed into the next step in which you know how to grow. However, open questions such as financial stability, such as intimacy and so forth, those kind of become too big of a question to answer. So when, as a parent, you think, okay, well, you're not going to be able to answer any of those questions in your own life because you're gaming too much. Well, that's not necessarily the case. But again, parents, they're trying to understand it as much as the kids that are growing up and that are playing these games consistently.
Changes in Nico have convinced his mother that there's something to heed in this powerful new gaming technology.
When you stop participating in things in your life that you once cared so much about, and you start changing habits and behavior and personality, there's only one obvious answer. It's addictive.
And so when we talk about being addictive, we think about more of the harmful aspects. When we talk about addiction, we talk about impairment. And impairment means you stop aspects of your life that you stop parts of your life in which that are healthy and that you should be pursuing, and then you take away that time, just like we talked about the investment. You take away from one part of your life and you put it into another. Now, behaviors, him being reactive to his mom taking it away from him, taking the time spent towards playing games and putting it into, maybe like going to the movies or something. Well, is that stimulating him? Well, for video games, sometimes it can be a problem when nothing else can stimulate you except for playing video games. However, there are always alternatives and substitutes to what is stimulating in real life and what is stimulating in video games and virtual reality. And that is what is unknown because it's all individualistic. What stimulates you can be different than what stimulates me. And so it's an ongoing process when you're growing up to finding those things and putting those kids in multiple different things so that they figure out what they want. Well, when kids kind of know what they want, they specify a lot of their time doing that one thing. When you think as a parent, subjectively that it's not healthy, well, you're going to do a lot of measures in which you say, okay, this is not going to be healthy. You need to stop this. Well, playing 12, 14 hours a day, yeah, that can be unhealthy. Definitely, because you're taken away from school and you're taken away from time with family and friends. You're taken away from other aspects that we need in life. But you think that it would be better off taking the control away, taking that time in gaming and putting it towards something else. And that's not necessarily into something that you think would be healthy. And that's not always the best case scenario.
It may sound like a stretch, a clinical addiction to, of all things, video games. But this summer, one of the medical community's foremost authorities, the World Health Organization, determined that video games actually do have the power to addict.
January 2022, the World Health Organization put gaming addiction in the ICD, the International, the International Manual for Conditions and Diseases, and so it'll be in the ICD 10 or 11. I forgot which one. ICD 10 or 11. Those are sections. The 10, those are a part of the psychological conditions and so forth. That's where gaming addiction is going to be. So yes, it will be. It's actually going to be a diagnosis as a condition for the DSM-5, which we talked about, which is where more of the, which is the diagnostical manual that the United States uses. It's only it's in section 3 of the book, which is for further review. So it's not technically a disorder. Internet gaming disorder is not technically a disorder. It's just there for further review. So hopefully soon in the next DSM-5, the IGD will actually become like an actual disorder that has enough sufficient data to support it, which there is.
Classified a brand new mental illness, internet gaming disorder. Drugs, alcohol, gambling, video games?
So to the brain, a drug is a drug, and sometimes that drug is a substance, and sometimes that drug is a behavior.
Psychiatrist David Greenfield says in recent years, more and more young patients have come through his office unable to resist the addictive power of games.
Video games activate the same pathways of the brain that all the other addictive, abusable drugs do.
All right, I'm gonna fast forward this. They talk about spending money, the gambling aspect of it, putting money into games, and that's a part of gambling as well. I think he put this well put. It's a drug is a drug, and the brain doesn't know the difference, except for how you rationalize and you create meaning out of what you're putting that time and money into. So let's fast forward to. So they talk about restart. So they talk about North Korea and how North Korea has one of the most serious problems of gaming addiction because they have gaming cafes and all that stuff. Plus, there's also the greatest venues in gaming and competitive gaming is in Korea. So that's what he kind of touches on. So for his perspective, he's trying shock therapy, in which he applies kind of like electric shock, like a very minor electric shock into parts of the brain, usually along the prefrontal cortex, in which it stabilizes from addiction, which is a very common idea. Well, it's a very drastic idea of the solution for addiction. So this is Restart.
A place called Restart has opened outside Seattle. It's America's
I wanted to work there
residential
actually,
rehab center, not for
but
drugs or alcohol,
again,
but for
counseling's a
video
little
games.
different.
Here, young gaming addicts attend group therapy sessions and get exposure to new hobbies.
When I mean that, I'm sorry, I didn't mean like counseling's different. I'm just meant that for school-wise, it's based on state licensure. So, in DC, there's not a lot. There's push here for gaming addiction, but not a lot. So that's why I'm here.
Hobbies, from music to
So,
exercise.
again, finding solutions
to
through other
decidedly
things.
less modern bent. It's a last resort for people like Charlie Brackey.
Me and my parents both hadn't really ever had the thought of let's look for a video game addiction clinic. But I knew that if I was going to give it another shot at sobriety, I needed to go for the biggest shot I could take.
Brackey's parents mortgaged their home to send him here, spending $50,000 on months of intensive treatment. He's since moved on and out of Restart, but he's been replaced by a new batch of young gamers with eerily similar stories.
So yeah, again, Restart is a place for gamers to go and seek out help and find alternatives to gaming because gaming has become excessive, and it takes away from what's important in their lives. Again, like failing out and potentially even substance abuse and all that stuff, and so they find themselves in these like outpatient facilities or even inpatient facilities for gamers. An old school way of dealing with gamers, which I don't like at all, is sending their kids to like the wilderness, sending them to these groups in which you have to like do things to survive, but it's not necessarily discussing and treating the problem of gaming addiction. It's just putting them in a different location away from gaming. It's like another reason to like restrict gaming habits. However, here you're actually doing group therapy. You're finding substitutes towards gaming, and you're also, you know, putting yourself in a new location, and so forth. But it's really through proper care, right? Through actual medical proper care.
Whenever I would sit down and start playing, it was nothing else mattered.
How many hours a day would you say?
Oh gosh, basically from when I woke up till when I went to sleep, probably like 12 to 14 hours a day.
I wasn't just failing in school, I was failing every part of my life that wasn't video gaming.
In a way, Noah, Ben, and Andrew are fortunate to be here. There's now a long waiting list to get into Restart.
That's true. There's a huge waiting list for Restart. And that's why, you know, $50,000. This is 2019. You know, every year it just goes up in admission because there's such a high need for gaming, for those to treat gaming addiction, as well as gambling, as well as pornography, anything related to behavioral addictions. There's such a huge need for counseling and help that, you know, a lot of these places that started quite early and already have a system in place don't, you know, they're booked up. So again, policy making. Okay, so now we're gonna go into, so this is EA's kind of PR guy, and he's just gonna kind of talk about the industry. But look at, I want you guys to notice what he does with these questions.
We're proudest of as an industry is taking responsibility for providing parents.
But he's wrong because there's not really any, because you're a business. You're trying to sell habits. And so that is the common model nowadays. Interesting topic, exactly. And you know what? It goes to a greater level of corporate understanding of what addiction is. Like, for them, they want to make money and they want to cover their asses. But at the same time, you know, they want to provide the users with something that's cutting edge and that is, you know, fun to play. And I don't disagree with that. Like, I think that, you know, what they do is amazing nowadays. EA, I mean, you know me and EA, man. You know, I'm not a big fan, but they are one of those corporations that want to provide users with what they want. Now, the problem with that is that you're going to put in a lot of parts in the game in which the user is going to gamble with it. And then we'll you know, another time we'll talk about competitive gaming and all that, but it's really all about selling the user to and selling their habits towards the product. And so yes, you know, I agree, gaming, you know, the game itself is just a tool for it, but that tool, just like a gun, you can still kill somebody with that tool. It's the same thing that we're dealing with, you know, same but different, right? They even talked about kids dying in cafes in North Korea because they don't eat, they don't sleep, they don't do anything but game. It's the same concept, but, you know, again, you know, it's really understanding how the game is affecting the user and how that user is differentiated from other users. That's how you know it's addictive. That's how you know what the underlying reason for it is. But however, addiction works in the same way. A drug is a drug. The brain can't tell the difference. And so this is why we have addiction, but we don't really understand that addiction.
We spoke to many young people, including teenagers, who say they play 6, 8, 10 hours a day. Would you allow your child to play that much video games?
I would look at this in a larger context as opposed to simply the hours.
Is there any number of hours?
That was actually a really good question that he asked. And he tried to beat around the bush.
It's a family decision in a family context.
We asked Pierre-Louis about what we've been told.
And that's true. It's a family context and a family. That's true as well. But he's still beating around the bush of the question: would you let of self-disclosure of would you let your kids do that? And I don't think he would have responded positively to that. He is the main lobbyist. He's pretty much the PR guy, so he's not going to saying that. Okay, you're telling everybody out here that gaming is not the problem. Like, gaming, the act of gaming is not the problem. And then what he's saying is like, okay, well, if it is a problem, it's individualistic. So I agree with him at a certain extent, but at the same time, he's covering his ass for the business and saying, look, we're doing the best we can, man. Like, but this is also the understanding that, like, we're not even considering the fact that there are, there's ways in which kids can really invest time and money into it. That's every business, though. Exactly. Like, they're trying to cover their asses, but again, every business has has a certain level of, corporate identity in the game. Like, they want to provide a game that the users enjoy, but they also want to keep you going within that game. It's up to the user to know whether you want to spend this money and time into this game. So from a corporate perspective, I don't really harp on them too much about it, because it's not really about it's not to the extent of which, like, the corporation is not doing enough, because they understand that addiction is like, there is an addiction out there for gaming. But it's just kind of like how casinos run. Like, casinos, as different as it is, if we consider it, from gaming, considering that you're putting a lot of money into it to make it back, right? For gaming, you're putting a lot of time and attention into something. Unless you make a career out of it, it's just a hobby, something that you do that you keep your brain sharp with. Gambling, it's not the same thing. Well, maybe it can be when it comes to poker, but a lot of it is based on chance. When it comes to gaming, there's a lot of tactics and a lot of strategy, visual spatial awareness. Like, there's a lot that goes into virtual reality, right, in comparison to, like, gambling per se. But when it comes to corporate interaction between the user, between the consumer and them, it's really the tool. The games are the tools. It's up to the user to really say and do what they want to do with that product, right? It's up to the parents to regulate, the games that they play. Like, if say, my kids are playing Mortal Kombat at fucking age 5, age 6, and like own this game, then that's on me, because I didn't regulate what they're growing up with and what games they're playing with, right? That's on me. But the problem here is that parents don't know what gaming is because they didn't grow up with it. They didn't have this. So when they gave it as kind of like a fun toy to these kids to mindlessly, play, not even mindlessly, but to kind of like absorb and consume what they're getting. Well, we're not understanding the parents aren't understanding what the underlining modalities that are being created within gaming. So now you're having this interaction between growth and my expectations of what they're doing. So it's really it's not, again, the corporate. It's not the corporation's fault. I mean, it can be a corporate problem if they're excessively pushing a product on people, but that's a part of their job, is to be able to sell products. You know, the model nowadays is to sell habits, but you're still in the end selling a product, right? You're still getting money from that product. So in totality, I just wanted to mention that, like, some of these documentaries take a more of an evil standpoint towards corporate identity and towards, you know, the kids playing video games, but it's actually the parents, and it's not anybody's fault because everybody's collectively a part of it, right? There's a corporate side of my problem. There is the parent side of my problem. There's my side of my problem. There's everybody's fault to what it is, but it's educating yourself to understanding how to control it, how to maintain yourself. Where are the lines, right? What does that balance look like to me in comparison to somebody else, right? That's the difference. Everybody's a part of it, but it's like everybody wants to point and say, it's your fault, EA, fuck you. No, it's not just EA's fault. It's the parents that are pointing the fingers and saying, fuck you. That's your fault for buying them the games, for buying them. But it can also amount to something. So here we go. Last video, and then we're going to get into some games because I know that we're going a little late. This is one of our longest like lectures, yes, because we're looking at videos, but because this is what we're here for. This is literally like the talk of, like, we built our way up to this, from starting with depression, clinical depression and depression, to you know, all the way up to now. This is what we've kind of been leading up to. So here, let's get into the last video, and then we'll be done. So this one is talking about the corporate side of it, but also talking about why are we getting hooked into it? Well, this is the other side of the corporation. There's the corporation that creates the games, creates the content, and then there is the content creators who bring in, such as myself, who bring you guys in for a certain reason. And for esports, the reason is to see what you could amount to if you played this game. So here we go.
It's called esports, an area of gaming that's heading fast toward the mainstream.
Players, please enter the Hexadome.
2 teams of 5 facing off against each other playing League of Legends, the most popular game in the world.
And players are absolutely willing to
one of the most popular games in the world.
Live on Sky TV with sharp-suited analysts and what they call shoutcasters.
This is Wizard of Oz gets the double tie 86! How do you let that happen?
And every show needs a
crazy mustache.
For the New Zealand gaming champs, it's Duan Mutu.
Tell me about this. Well, this is New Zealand's premier esports facility, so this is called the Hexadome.
He wants to raise the bar for gaming here.
And then this along here is basically the best setup you can get almost in New Zealand. So you've got a custom-made gaming chair. You've also got a headset here. And then down there is the best PC to make sure it's fast.
Watching computerized characters fighting on TV might sound boring to some, but the numbers show it's already challenging traditional sports for an audience.
Exactly. This is one of the largest industries in the world right now for attention by user. Right? There are more people watching esports at a given time than even traditional sports. And that's just a fact at this point. But the reason why is because this is what you can amount to playing video games. And we've never had that since the past 10 years. Past 10 years, this industry has grown to, like, more than over 100 million people, 100 million people watching, like a game, one game, a tournament. Like, can you imagine, like, over 100 million people being at, like, a football game? No, you can't. Because the reason why is esports. You're taking into a factor, you're taking into a factor the fact that you're using the internet to connect the user to what they're watching, and that's extremely new nowadays. But that's why it's so popular, man. That's why it's so big. And the very fact that, again, you could potentially be one of these people on these stages in front of hundreds of thousands of people playing League of Legends, Dota 2, Overwatch, whatever, Warzone, whatever.
Bigger than some of the rugby as far as the NPC, will be bigger than the cricket as far as the 2020, and will be bigger than some of the netball matches already in this country.
We even have our own national gaming team, the E-Blacks.
Are they athletes?
I believe they're athletes. Yeah, you talk about their heart rate going right through, the reaction time is quick as F1 drone.
As an industry, they're well aware of the potential for addiction.
We do feel responsibility, and that's why we want to make sure that at the top level of competitive gaming that we paint the right picture for people. So we're really mindful that our players that are in this tournament do other sports, they eat right, and that will then translate down to the fans.
And see, that's huge. That's a way to act on addiction, is to have a role, to take responsibility, and to go forth and provide, a good schedule for their athletes. Every team, every big team has a coach, has managers, has all these things that, they also get paid for, that take responsibility for this. So for gamers that spend 7 to 12 hours a day playing games, well, they have to understand, well, is 12 hours healthy, or should we, add in like eating, going outside, doing other things aside from making money this way? Like, yes, again, it's gaming, and you want to fall in love doing hobbies, doing what you love to do, but you also want to take care of yourself, and you also want to, even for workaholics, like, you want to take them away from work so that they can focus on other areas of their life, so that they're not drowning themselves. And that's the same thing for gaming addiction. You don't want to let them drown themselves and kill themselves to be the best. No, you want them to do this the right way and take care of themselves. And that can transfer over to being the best athlete that you can be. Same thing with as an athlete in any capacity. Same thing with being, a businessman, a doctor, whatever it is. Take care of yourself first before you do this thing. All right, so let's fast forward the interview.
50,000 unique devices that are logged on to Twitch. It's a very...
They talk about Twitch.
That's 1 in every 6 New Zealanders. Is it any wonder Duan thinks the numbers are on his side?
98% of households have some form of gaming device. So I think that the younger audience have grown up with it, and you go up to sort of over 35 and people just don't understand it because they're not around it.
How old are you?
35, so I just made the cut.
The crowd mirrors the virtual demographics. Marginally
They talk to lollipops.
50,000 people from all over the world watch.
Hi, Laurie.
They are called the Pop Squad, and they pay for the privilege.
I just thought how amazing that all these people want to support me and help me fund my career.
What do you think's made you so successful?
I think it's my personality. I'm a huge people person, so that, and I scream and make people laugh a lot. So
thank you so much for the brand new sub up to the Pop Squad. You f***ing rule.
Understand how big this world really is.
Anyone of any age that doesn't know about Twitch and I tell them, they're just like, are you serious? My God.
I didn't know anything about Twitch until I did
Until
this.
now? Yes.
Exactly. A lot of the older population doesn't know anything about Twitch, so they don't know how much Twitch has an influence on gaming habits as well. But you have to understand Twitch has really good qualities in which Twitch provides a safe place for those gamers so that they can come interact with their favorite streamers and so forth, and they can feel more at home in front of these people and taking time away from gaming and feel connected in some capacity. And that's the beauty of Twitch. That's the beauty of streamers and all that stuff. Now, for the streamer themselves, you're gambling, right? And hot tubs, yeah, exactly. Hot tub streams and big banana floaties, exactly. Like that's like extremely. That's like those are the huge qualities of Twitch that make people feel connected with people, right? Like, consider the last year, Twitch has grown, like, in viewer base and in streamer base. Like, it's grown over, I think it's like I feel like it's like 20%, 30% they've grown over the past year because, you know, like, you're stuck inside all day, like, and people are still stuck inside, you know, if they don't have they're not vaccinated, their job requires it, or they work online, or they go to school online, whatever it is. And so, you know, you're trying to find people that you can relate to the most, that plays your favorite games, that is interactive or non-interactive, or finding a community that is interactive that you feel safe with. Like, that's kind of like what is so extremely important about streaming, is that it connects you, the gamer, with the community that other people game with, and finding people that relate to you as in personality, right? So that's again what I thought was so unique about streaming, is that there's a cultural aspect to gaming rather than just being a gamer. And that's something that parents and a lot of the older generation doesn't really understand about gaming. There's a purpose to this community. Holy fuck. It's not just mindless screen time. People are actually connecting with others that play the same game. Now, when it becomes a problem, sure, they're not taking care of themselves, then sure, we have to consider, is this game really a positive influence? But it's really the Twitch streamers that give off the vibes of the game in general, for sure. Absolutely. The identity of the game relates to the streamers that identify the game's personality for them. For sure. Let's kind of fast forward. I want to show you. So they talked about these twins. They talked about the Monk twins, who are identical twins who were excessively gaming, like 12 hours a day, 7 hours a day, 12 hours a day, taken away from some schoolwork and all that stuff, and how it could be addictive in nature. But then they move into, okay, well, how did they change, understanding that this can be a problem? So this is Alex's side of it.
Well, after 12 years gaming, one of them, Alex, just wanted to go outside.
I went out for runs and things. Just feeling the wind on my face was just a great feeling to be back in the real world.
He had a couple of goes at weaning himself off gaming. The third time round, he nailed it with a 90-day detox.
How long?
There is a strategy by one of the researchers. I forgot who it is, but he said that a 90-day detox would be the first initial step to resetting your reward pathway, in which you can get back to that healthy balance. Like, the hedonic line comes back down to a healthy like a healthy height in comparison to reaching that hedonic line. They say 90 days is the best way to detox yourself. So yeah, he'll talk a little bit about his detox.
Have you been free from gaming now?
Now, it would be about 265 days.
About?
Yeah. I don't know the exact number. Actually, it would be about exactly 265. I keep a counter.
And to fill the gaming void, Alex took himself way outside his comfort zone. He worked on his fitness, kept a journal, wrote poetry, took up photography, and forced himself to meet strangers.
You know, I didn't have the best social skills, but eventually I just had to just go for it, and then once I got into the rhythm, it came a lot easier.
It shows how deep you were in the virtual world, doesn't it?
Yeah, in a way, because it just wasn't a natural thing for me to go and make new friends. It's not a skill that I had developed properly.
Give it a good
schoolwork's picked up. Dad's happy.
It is much better without a screen between us. it works better in that you can talk about the issues of the world, not just the issues of what's in the next game.
So there it is. That's Alex's perspective of the brothers. He said that, I took it a whole nother way. I did, photography. I was doing fencing. I was doing these things just to, kind of supplement my time. Also, I wanted to force myself to meet people, outside the screen. This is kind of like the complete opposite of what you see gamers doing, and like where gamers kind of end up. Like gamers usually end up staying within the business and taking it and having a purpose with it. For him, I think it was kind of the same. Like he wanted to capture what beauty in his own way with photography. And I don't know what he's doing now, but he wanted to be able to capture a picture or a image of something that he found as, as something to be remarked and something to be reminded of. So he, I guess, in that way, kind of took that gaming side of it and captured, what certain aspects of life is important. Just like in a game, you play a game and you play things, and there's certain images in your brain that capture, the beauty of a video game. So it's a complete opposite. But on the other end, the other brother,
twin brother James, is still gaming.
It's disappointing on my side because usually I'd play my games with Alex all the time, just like two people games. But once he'd permanently quit games, then I had to go and search for other people to play with if I wanted to be social.
Is James an addict?
That's for him to answer.
Are you an addict?
At
Are you an
times,
addict?
I would say
Are you an
yes,
addict?
when I just play them for no reason, but definitely at times.
he just said that was a really important quote. He is an addict if he plays them with no reason. But when he has a reason, for example, the game he created, this is the game he created all by himself, then it's not an addiction.
So I'm just in control of it.
And you know what they say about turning your passion into your profession.
So this took me a long time to do for the animations.
James is already making his own games.
Hopefully I'll be able to sell it by the end of the year, or maybe sometime next year.
He wants to work in an industry that's already worth over $100 million in New Zealand.
No, I realise that I've spent a lot of time gaming, and so becoming a game developer was something I wanted to do, and so you need to play games to be able to be a game developer.
James wants to be a game designer now. Does that mean it's not addiction anymore?
I suppose.
And he's just like, what the fuck, man? I guess. But in totality, ladies and gentlemen, gaming can be even with a purpose. Gaming can be an addiction because you can consider being a workaholic as also being an addiction. So so the complete opposite side of mindless gaming is gaming with a purpose, and that still could be an addiction because you're taken away from other parts of your life to invest in what you're doing. So that's really it. That's really what I wanted to talk about today, is really talking about the two sides of the coin of behavioral addictions, where research could really find where research can find places in which you can continue to ask these questions and collect data on it. But for the most part, gambling, pornography, they are all three very different and the same. A drug is a drug in the brain, right? But the purpose of why you do it is also super important. And I think that is what we are missing. Is not figuring out why we're gaming. Not figuring out, why we're gaming. But it's not about just them doing it and just mindlessly doing it. It's the fact of there's a purpose behind it and we don't know why. So these are the questions that researchers such as myself have to ask, because if somebody were to play an excessive amount of video games, okay, well, why are you spending this much amount of time doing it? Sure, but why this game? Out of all the games in the world, why this game are you spending this much time? And how does this game reflect you as a person? And how do you find yourself in problematic situations regarding behavior, regarding, social engagement, regarding, education? What a part of it is destructive, self-destructive in a lot of ways. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is our talk about behavioral addictions. Very general. We could go more in depth about gaming or pornography or gambling or shopping or tanning or whatever it is. We could do that some other time. And we probably will retouch gaming addiction, because we all know that that's kind of why I'm here. But at the same time, I just wanted to give you kind of like a general consensus of understanding, okay, well, we know that certain behaviors are problems, but we don't know why people do what they do, right? Why are these behaviors so interesting to certain individuals while other behaviors are interesting to others, right? Why do we have people that excessively work out compared to those who excessively eat, right? I don't know. We should probably ask.